This is on Zoom. Hi.
Hello.
Hi, my name is Angela Demovic, and I'm the current president of the Global Learning Center, and I wanted to welcome everybody this evening, and thank you guys for coming out. It's great to have such a nice big group, and as always, we want to thank the church for hosting us. We have some events coming up. So before we introduce this evening's speaker, in September we do have an event. We are still kind of hammering out the details a little bit, but we will have a September speaker. So please, if you're not already in our email list, if we don't already have your email on our list, Becky Buska has that list where you came in when you first came in the door. We can add you to our email list so that you can know what's going on, and you can also keep an eye on our different social media posts for the September event. In October, this is our big annual event. October 11th is going to be our United Nations banquet that we hold every year. So we look forward to seeing some of you there as well. Our speaker at the UN banquet is going to be Rebecca Shute, and she is going to speak on the indispensable role of international law and human rights in a chaotic time. So make sure you have that marked on your calendar. We're also going to award this year's Howard and Janine Johnston Global Community Citizenship Award. And our recipient this year, and I hope I don't mispronounce her name, is Anya Barnett, and she is the founder of Safe Streets. So hopefully she will be here to join us and receive her award, and we'll have a great evening. So without further ado, let me introduce Rebecca Buska, who is going to introduce this evening's speaker.
Good evening. My name is Becky Allen Bush, as Angela mentioned. I did want to say a couple of things before I introduce Tracy. And the first thing is that I am first generation American. My mother was an immigrant. We are all in some way or another immigrants. So I just wanted to emphasize that. Personally, my family was in the Netherlands during World War II. My grandfather and cousins and various family members were in work camps. So what's going on today is very near and dear to my heart. And I do appreciate Tracy taking the time out to talk to us about what rights and what we have, what's going on today. I didn't want to say much because I want Tracy to take her time and have the ability to answer questions, but I wanted to give you the quote I found from her website. I thought it was perfect. We are an Atlanta-based immigration advocates who ensure that everyone we come in contact with is fully seen, heard, and treated with respect and fairness. So I thought that spoke of her beautifully. And also on a first note, I am friends with the family, and the whole family's fabulous. So with that, I'd like to introduce you to Tracy Morgan, our speaker this evening. Thank you.
It's fun. Oh, Tracy, it's you. So, thank you for coming out on a Sunday night to be, I'm not gonna joke, it's not gonna be an uplifting talk. I will do my best to just lay out the facts. It'll be 90% just like the new hellscape that we're living in, sorry church. And then 10% talking about the things that we can do and are doing to protect our immigrant friends, neighbors, and coworkers. There's so much happening in the news, and I'm going to start by giving an overview, and it's going to be like, oh my gosh, is she ever going to stop? And then we're going to dig a little deeper into the mass deportation machine, some of the other bigger changes that we're seeing in the world of immigration. So again, thank you for coming out. So to start, I would say, anytime an administration changes, we expect changes with immigration policy and other big ticket issues. But we knew that Trump coming in this time around, he was a lot more prepared than he was before to hit the ground running with all these ideas. Obviously, we've heard about Project 2025. A lot of that is coming into reality, unfortunately, these days, or at least trying to come into reality. Since January 20th, there have been 413 immigration policy changes at the federal level. So my job is never boring. I will say that thankfully there have been, great groups of litigators who are doing things on the national level, like with birthright citizenship, that are suing, and there have been over 80 federal lawsuits filed on various topics, and we are seeing some success with that. There has been a 50% increase in immigration detentions, and we'll definitely dive into that. So we're now at a record 59,000 people who are being detained. For a system that was designed to hold maybe 50,000. So we'll talk about the overcrowding as well. ICE arrests are up dramatically. Under Biden, the average was about 760 arrests a day. Now, ICE has a stated goal, although they won't say it's official, but their goal is to arrest 3,000 a day. ICE has a giant new budget, the Big Beautiful Bill, which my husband likes the name of because his name is Bill. So he likes to be beautiful. But I call it Big Stupid Bill. He's like, wait, what are you saying? I'm like, no, it's but ICE has a new budget. Their budget now is 62% bigger than the Federal Bureau of Prisons budget, just for immigration. They now have $45 billion to expand detention centers. It's a 265% increase. They're doubling the detention facilities to house 100,000 immigrants. They now have a $30 billion budget for enforcement and removal. This is a threefold increase over what they had before. They're hiring 10,000 new deportation officers. We're looking at the January 6 people who were pardoned. They have no hiring standards. They got rid of the age requirement. Basically, you have a pulse, you're willing to sell your soul, go in and get a $50,000 bonus and sign up for ICE. If you haven't seen the South Park episodes, I highly recommend them. They make us happy, even though I am paying for Paramount Plus, which I'm not excited about, but laughter is cathartic. While the ICE budget increases and the numbers of officers certainly increase, immigration judges, their numbers are dwindling. Anyone basically who was hired under Biden has been put on administrative leave or has been fired for unsatisfactory job performance, saying they approved more than 5% of their asylum cases. So we have fewer immigration judges. We also have fewer officers at U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, so the agency that adjudicates green cards and naturalization, the benefits side. DOJ got involved and said, hey, we don't need you anymore. If you've been here more than 10 or 20 years, take this great retirement package. And a lot of officers have. In Atlanta, where I practice, there are 42 adjudicating officers. There are now 32. And there aren't plans to hire back. And so you're not just losing numbers and capacity, but you're losing experience. And so things are getting harder. We're having to educate officers. So that's another wrench in the system. The Trump administration has gotten rid of the Ombudsman's office that dealt with issues between the public and USCIS, also between the public and detention centers. They were there to kind of help facilitate issues when there were problems with interpreting the law fairly, or the detention centers looking at the facilities and making sure that everything was up to snuff. Those offices are gone. The Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division is also pretty much gone, totally decimated. So again, there is no place to report violations to, no one who's going to investigate these violations. We've also seen old laws resurrected to enforce immigration law, and we will talk more about these, but we've got the 1789 Alien Enemies Act, and we've got the 1940 Alien Registration Act. We'll also talk about the naming convention for that, the term alien. We have the suspension of the refugee resettlement program and allowing refugees into our country, unless you're a white South African. They're really the only ones who've been allowed in since January 20th. We are totally ignoring our role to be a true beacon in the world to welcome people. So we got that. We also see an increased push for self-deportation. The government realizes that they don't have the ability to deport everyone who's here undocumented. So you've got this program is called CBP-1, Customs and Border Protection 1. It was originally designed to be used at the border for CBP for refugees and asylum seekers to come to the border and say, I want to apply for asylum, but there were so many that this system was like an appointment scheduling system saying, okay, we can't see you today, come back in a week, here's your appointment, and you can present your claim for asylum. CBP-1 has now been turned into a self-deportation app. You can go into CBP-1, you can say, I am here in the United States undocumented, I will be leaving with my family members, and the rumor is, and this is on the website, once you leave and have proof of that, you can be reimbursed up to $1,000 for your plane ticket. There's no budget for this. It's just something that the administration has done willy-nilly. I have not heard of anyone being successful with that. But what it does is that it gives people who are scared kind of a seed. And I have a human trafficking survivor from the UK. She's been here since she was about 13, trafficked for decades. She has an application in, but it's going to take another year for it to be adjudicated. And she called me, she's like, I want to self-deport. And I'm like, why? You are so close. And she's like, well, it's just, I don't like living in this fear, this uncertainty, I don't have a work permit, I don't really have an identity. I don't know what to do with my life. Like, I am scared. And this is a white woman who sounds just like me. And I can only imagine that people who stand out a bit more the fear that they're feeling. So that is definitely a push. In line with the self-deportation, the mechanisms that they're using are just cruel. Anytime someone receives a hearing notice from the immigration court, or even a decision from the immigration courts, there's a flyer inserted in English and Spanish saying, self-deport, you're in the United States illegally, we don't want you here. It's not quite that verbiage, but it says self-deport. They're sending that out to everybody, including those who are granted asylum. And to me, it's just the messaging is just so incoherent. They're not paying any attention. It's just like, it doesn't matter if you were granted something, they still want you to self-deport. I go to green card interviews about every week. They have TVs up. Usually it's pretty innocuous. Sometimes it's HGTV. Sometimes they'll have just, flyers up or signage up about, you can apply for citizenship in 5 years after having your green card, or, in a weather emergency, go to this area. Really innocuous. Well, now it's nothing but propaganda. You're sitting there waiting for your green card and naturalization interview, and you're watching Christino talk about the invasion of the border. You see images of immigrants, their mugshots, and it says deported, deported, deported. You hear President Trump say, you have to commute the right way. We will find you, we will deport you. And these are people who are doing it the right way. Why are you sending them this message? Again, these are people coming for naturalization. They've gone through the process. They're doing everything right. But again, it's just about demonizing the population of immigrants. With the Big Beautiful Bill, we have also seen a significant increase in prices. So, for example, asylum used to be free. Asylum seekers often come here with little to nothing. They're now charging a $100 fee, which, okay, that's minimal, but really that goes against the treaties and obligations that we have to protect refugees and asylum seekers. And now there's a $100 annual maintenance fee. I have asylum cases that have been pending 14 years. So what incentive does this bring to the government to move the case forward if they're going to get at least $100 every year out of someone? Asylum work cards, just to kind of give you an idea, used to be $470, they're now $795. So again, working with a population that has little to nothing, they are definitely seeing a burden placed upon them. In the immigration court system, fees have also gone up. If you apply for a green card with court, which is different to what I was talking about a little earlier about applying for
for a green card with U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. So with U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, think of it as like affirmative, like I'm coming forward, I want to do this thing. With court, it's more defensive, like, oh, I've been caught, I'm in the deportation system now I'm going to try to file for my green card if certain conditions are met. The fees for filing for a green card in court have gone from $1,440 to $2,940 per person. So if you have a large family, thinking about my Afghan clients that tend to have 10 kids, that's awful and inaccessible for most people. We have seen a change of definitions and terms. If you were here last time, thank you parents, we emphasized that simply being in the United States undocumented was not a crime. It's a civil violation. You speed, you get a ticket, you don't call yourself a criminal. You did a thing you shouldn't have, you got punished, in the story, you move on. Same sort of thing with immigration. Now, there are some federal rules that say, okay, if you were in the United States, you got order deported, you were actually deported, and then you came back without paperwork, that can be a federal crime and you can be prosecuted for that. But simply being in the U.S. without documentation is not a crime. It's still not. Though the Trump administration would certainly have you believe that it is. So they talk about, all these criminal immigrants in the United States, which simply isn't true. They haven't committed crimes. But that's the terms that they're using, and the more they use it, the more they hope that it sticks in the vernacular, the more common it becomes, the more that people will think that people in the United States without paperwork are criminals. So they're saying anyone who's not a U.S. citizen, anyone who's got the green card, or valid non-immigrant status like student or temporary worker, like they're all illegal. Even those who may have had status and got revoked, they're saying people who had temporary protected status are also illegal and criminals, and like that can't be because they had this legal status. So like with the temporary protected status, they're like, nope, the whole program is illegal. Anybody who's had it is illegal. They are now criminals and we will deport them. And again, it's like, no, there are these programs here to protect them, but the government doesn't seem to care. We talked about this briefly too. It's turning immigrants into invaders, using terminology that we would see during a time of war. The Alien Enemies Act, for example, calling them, these foreign terrorist organizations, like claiming that a gang can be that, whereas before we would use that primarily against, an enemy country, an enemy combatant that way. So again, they're just using these terms to rile people up and stoke the fear, stoke the fire in our communities. We've seen a shift in federal law enforcement priorities. They have removed FBI agents, DEA agents, and even IRS agents from the important work that they do to do immigration enforcement. And so FBI agents, they are trained to research and develop and then go in quickly and come out. They're not designed, they're not trained to be on the streets policing, and yet that's what they're being called to do. They're being told your work on anti-terrorism, your work on anti-trafficking is not as important as immigration. Everybody is doing immigration now at the cost of doing this other really important, necessary work. With the IRS, we're seeing new interagency communication. There is a law that actually says the IRS and immigration shouldn't talk to each other because the government has wanted them to pay their taxes, and they didn't want people to feel afraid that their information would be used to report them to ICE. Well, now there is an interagency memo that allows the IRS to give ICE information on certain individuals. So addresses, social security numbers, all of that, so they can go and find them easier. And we have Social Security playing along as well. If someone is in the country undocumented, they may have an old deportation order. Social Security is declaring them dead in the system. And meaning that the Social Security number is no longer valid. You can't go and get your driver's license. Like, you show up in person and say, hi, I'm here, I'm alive. Not good enough. It is moving heaven and earth to finding all sorts of new ways to do it. And I think there's a lot that we don't even know yet, because Elon Musk has gone in and created all this AI and communication between the agencies, and we'll just, I guess, wait and see how bad it's going to get, but it will get worse. We have seen USCIS go back on gender issues. It used to be on forms you could put male, female, non-binary, other. Now it's just male or female. And they have to use the sex that is listed on your birth certificate for any of your immigration documents. So this is interesting. We have clients from more progressive countries. Their passport says female. Their birth certificate might say male. And so now what do you do with those documents? The US is saying, nope, it's the sex you were born with, and that's it, and we're not changing anything else. So again, dehumanizing people. We're making it harder for people to come to the United States, just in time for the World Cup and the Olympics when we want people here. Anytime you go in for a visa interview at a US embassy or consulate now, you are told that you have to set your social media profiles to public, so that the consular officer can dig through your social media post to see if you've said anything anti-Trump, maybe anything pro-Palestinian, and this can be reasons to deny you a visa to come to the United States. So no right to privacy. We are also now instituting bonds for people who are applying for and receive tourist visas. There are 3 levels of bonds, 5,000, 10,000, and 15,000. The idea being you pay for these, you come to the United States, you leave when you're supposed to, you get your money back. Only 2 countries have been announced so far, and this is pretty recent. Malawi and Zambia, they have to pay $15,000 to get a tourist visa. Pay to play. We have more surveillance. And I think we all know this, but for me, as an immigration lawyer traveling internationally, I am worried every time I come to the United States, because my phone can be searched. And there is no right to privacy with your face. So if you have, a biometric set up on your phone, they can hold it up to your face, unlock your phone, and have access to everything. I have client files, I have client emails on my phone. If you have a passcode, maybe not so much, they don't have a right to your passcode, but they can keep your phone. So I am now in the habit of removing all my work apps before I return to the United States. And we have heard stories about attorneys, for example, there's an immigration attorney in Detroit who was held for 4 hours saying, no, I'm not giving you this information, attorney-client privilege, I know what my rights are. He was released and everything was fine, but again, it's about making life difficult. 4 hours, inconvenience, missed flights, his family is tired, hungry, worried, while all of this is going on. So it's not just rumor, like it is happening, I know this person. In some ways, red states have it a little easier right now. Again, I'm in Florida, which is more red than purple sadly right now. But we're seeing the bulk of enforcement activity happening in blue states, in the so-called sanctuary cities. We've seen it in California, in Los Angeles, we're seeing it in Washington, D.C. now, where ICE and the various other agencies who are now called to do immigration work are just patrolling the streets, asking people, without any rhyme or reason, hey, show me your paperwork. How do I know you're a U.S. citizen? There has been pushback. The courts have been good to say you can't racially profile. Thank you, California. But they still do it. We've also seen, in regards to law enforcement, more cooperation with the federal government by local agencies. There's a program that's been around for a while called the 287G program. It's a section of the Immigration and Nationality Act that we use for this. And it basically deputizes or allows federal agents like ICE to come in and tell local law enforcement, here's how you act as an ICE agent. Here's how you determine if someone's in the United States undocumented. Here's how you issue the notice to appear, which is what starts the deportation process. And we're seeing more of these programs come into passage. Kansas was the second state nationally to have a statewide agency deputized under this program. The KBI now can act as ICE agents, thanks to our Attorney General here. He who must not be named. We've also seen local counties sign on to do these programs. Since January 20th, Cali, Ellis, Reno, Rush, Shawnee, and Wabaunsee counties have all signed up to do this program, to be ICE agents on the ground. So, something to keep in mind. I'm gonna take a sip of water. So that's where we are. There's so much more. Those are the lowlights. I want to shift now and talk a little bit about how does ICE get to this 3,000 arrests per day quota. So, truth is, a lot of the undocumented population, they're not criminals, spoiler alert. So they thought, okay, well we can just go to the local courthouses, we can go to the jails, we can go ahead and take care of the people who are criminals and get them out of here. There weren't that many people, and so the Trump administration was really frustrated. They're like, how do we increase our numbers? So that's when they started going after low-hanging fruit. So what does that look like? Who are these people? There are people on what's called orders of supervision. Think of it as like immigration probation. They have an order of deportation, meaning they've gone through the process, but they haven't been physically deported because of maybe humanitarian issues or their country won't accept them back. And so they've been in the United States doing these check-ins annually. They're now going to these check-ins and they're not coming out. They're being put on planes. ICE is saying, you had your day in court, you had your due process. Doesn't matter that your wife has died of leukemia and you're her care provider. Doesn't matter that your child has severe autism and you're the only one who can communicate effectively with them. Doesn't matter. All they see is a deportation order and they want to execute it. We also see people with old removal orders who are trying to solve their immigration issues. They're also getting arrested. So, a little bit in the weeds. When you file a family-based green card application, the foundation is called an I-130. It's what the U.S. citizen files to tell immigration, this is my family member, I want to sponsor them to be in the United States. Under Biden, these applications were approved 99% of the time without an interview. Now, under Trump, everybody's being called in for an interview. So this couple, for example, they go to their interview, they have the old deportation order, but they're trying to start the process to legalize themselves and work through the system. And you need this I-130 first. But now they have this deportation order, they're in a federal building. USCIS, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, they're calling ICE. Saying, I have this person here in my office, come pick them up. So you get punished for trying to do the right thing. So we also have clients who may have old deportation orders that they don't know about. And you're like, how can that happen? Well, I have a client whose family was from Venezuela. They came to the United States 25 years ago. He was 4. Family went through the deportation process, applied for asylum. They were denied, but they were allowed to stay under an order of supervision. He was 4. He doesn't remember any of this. And, doing our research as we were preparing the case, he's like, oh yeah, my mom told me something about court. I don't know. Found the paperwork, sure enough, he has an order of deportation. Looked in his eyes for the past 25 years not knowing it. And now suddenly we're like, we don't know what to do. You file this form to say that you want to be your status 6, you're going to be arrested. You don't file this form, you're living in the shadows. And if you do get arrested at a worksite raid or a traffic stop, you don't have anything to show any sort of support for you. We also have domestic violence victims who might have old orders of deportation. This happened in Houston. So again, a real life story. I know the attorney. Her client called the police to report a domestic violence incident against her husband. They were both undocumented. The wife had an old order of deportation. Houston has a 287G program. They're typing all her information in as the victim. Oh, you have a deportation order. We're going to arrest you and hold you for ICE. So how does this protect our communities? It does not. It disincentivizes people from making our communities safer from reporting crimes. And it's just mind-blowing. Recently, over the last month, we have seen people getting arrested at their immigration court hearings. Again, people who are trying to do the right thing, they have been told to go to court, they show up to court, and here's what's happening. Again, a little bit into the weeds, but bear with me. Being pro-immigrant, you don't get nifty little sound bites. You have to like go all in. So with immigration court, you go to court and you say, I'm here in the United States, I want to file for asylum. You go to maybe 2 or 3 short hearings where you file your application, you file evidence, and then finally they set your trial date a few years in the future. Well, under Trump, there is a new expansion of what's called expedited orders of removal. Under the old version, if you were in the United States for 14 days or less and you were apprehended by ICE, you could be put on a fast track to deportation. You had no right to see a judge. They could just send you back to your home country. Trump's administration has expanded this to say anybody who's in the United States for less than 2 years without status is subject to expedited order of removal. So what's happening, and I think this is where we see ICE and immigration judges maybe not working in cahoots, but they definitely know what's going on, maybe unspoken. The ICE attorney in court says, oh, this person's been here less than 2 years. The only reason they're allowed to be here right now is because they have a pending court date. I'm going to move as the ICE attorney, prosecuting attorney, to dismiss or terminate the deportation case. ICE attorney says, okay, we're going to move to terminate. The judge says, yeah, you don't want to move forward with the case. That's fine. Like, that's your choice. And they end or terminate the deportation case. Now there's no more pending court case. ICE agents are in the hallway, and they know who is in court. And they're like, okay, Juan, you're coming with me. You don't have a pending court date. You've been here less than 2 years. Expedited order of removal. Away you go. Again, people who are trying to do things the right way. We're seeing the collateral arrest, racial profiling, going to Home Depot to just harass people and ask to see their immigration paperwork. We see ICE go into one person's home, saying, hey, we want to ask you about Jose. Jose doesn't live there, but somebody opens the door. Now ICE can come in and ask anyone about their immigration status. We see family members who are filming a loved one being detained, arrested, assaulted by ICE. And then suddenly they're asked, oh, well, show me your paperwork, and then they're arrested as well. So that's another way that ICE is able to get more people. ICE is also able to get more people because the administration is making more and more people undocumented. We talked about temporary protected status. They're revoking that for people who've been in the United States 2, 5, 30 years in some cases. Afghanistan has 9,000 people now without status. Cameroon, 17,000 people. Haiti, which is kind of interesting because there's a lawsuit happening and they're on hold and protected through February, but another 5,000 people. Honduras, 72,000 people now without status. Folks from Nepal, 13,000 people, no status. Nicaragua, 4,000. Big one, Venezuela. 350,000 people that had status now have no status. So again, low-hanging fruit. ICE knows where they are. They've been filing their applications every 2 years, reviewing their work hard, doing their due diligence, but now they're going to be punished. ICE is going to come knock their door. We had parole programs that were put in place by Biden. People who came to the United States under the CBP-1 program were paroled, allowed into the United States, even though they didn't have a visa, so that they could fight for asylum here. And now the Trump administration is saying these paroles are invalid. They're all undocumented. 400,000 people just in that population alone. So these numbers are adding up, and that's how you're going to get to their mass deportations, is through revoking status and hurting people who are trying to do things the right way. One that really hits hard for me, because our firm worked a lot with the Afghan population. Some Afghans were able to come over under Operation Allies Welcome after the fall of Kabul, and they've been able to apply for asylum, but there was another program that they could apply for called a special immigrant visa. They worked with the military, they were translators, they were cultural attachés, and they received special permission. They would get letters from the chief of mission where they were assigned from the U.S. military saying this person was instrumental, they need to stay in the United States, otherwise, if they go back to the Taliban, they will be killed. Well, now the United States is revoking those in some circumstances. There have been a few of these letters that have been called into question regarding regarding not the authenticity, but the signer's intention, like maybe something shady was going on. Nothing's been proven. But they're like, we don't think that your SIV, your special immigrant visa, was valid. These are now people who have permanent residency status. They've been in the United States for 3 or 4 years. They've built a life here. They are safe here. Their daughters are in school here. And now the government is saying, we don't think any of this is legitimate. We're going to revoke your status. Good luck. And sending people back to Afghanistan. Again, I don't know how we can treat our allies this way. Using old laws to create new problems. We've talked about the Alien Enemies Act, claiming that gangs are foreign terrorist organizations that then allows the government to remove people without due process to third countries. The Registration Alien Act, basically this was enacted in 1940, saying, if you're in the United States undocumented, we need you to register. If you come legally, you're documented, you're registered. They know who you are and where you are. Now, there was no mechanism between 1948 and, ironically enough, my birthday, April 11th, 2025, for people to register. And so they created a system. You go online, you register. If you're undocumented, what's your incentive to register? Give them your address and your name, letting them know that you're here. Well, if you don't register, you could face criminal prosecution. Again, criminalizing the immigrant. And so people are left with this catch-22. Do I do this and register and put a target on my back? Or do I just hope and pray that I don't get caught and that I won't face criminal prosecution that then leads to ICE and deportation and everything else? So, people get arrested. Then what? We have detention centers. 71% of the people detained do not have a criminal conviction. 71%. They could have charges pending. Not everybody is an angel. But these are people detained for really no reason other than a civil immigration violation. And we talked about the overcrowding. 59,000 people are detained in a system designed to house 50,000. People are crammed into these facilities, and they're using makeshift facilities, like a waiting room at one of the ICE offices has been turned into a multi-day holding facility for people. There's no access to a bathroom, there are no windows, no great ventilation. It's like being locked in your doctor's lobby. Well, not even a lobby, but like the doctor's office. You're waiting, and you're in there with maybe 20 other people. And you don't know for how long, how many days. They are shipping people to immigration detention centers that are far away from metro areas. We hear a lot about the one in Wichita, Louisiana. There's also one in Stewart, Georgia. Stewart, Georgia is about 4 hours from Atlanta. There aren't many. There's one immigration attorney in Stewart, Georgia. So people are away from resources, they're away from their families, they're away from the evidence that they might be able to have to present their case, and they're away from legal representation. ICE also moves people quickly. And so I think you may have heard with some of the more high-profile cases with those at Tulane, at Columbia, the courts had to intercede and say, ICE, you can't move a person every day, every 2 days. They need to stay put. And the reason that they move people isn't because the facilities are better somewhere. It's because it makes it difficult for a lawyer to file a habeas petition. Habeas being, where the body is, who has control of the physical person. And lawyers are asking for their clients to be released, obviously. Well, jurisdiction rests where the body is. I know it sounds kind of morbid, but it's where the person is physically located. So if they're moving people around, attorneys don't have time to file these cases. Or they file them and they move them overnight, and the judge looks at it the next day, and boom, they're not there anymore. So the judge has no power to help the immigrant be released. We've heard stories about alligator Alcatraz. It was built by Governor DeSantis. It is a Florida detention center. It is not an ICE detention facility. I mean, it's not counted in those 59,000 numbers, although they do house 5,000 immigrants there. 5,000 detainees in tents, trailers, chain-linked areas. There are maggots in the food, there is flooding, the restroom system is basically non-existent. And of course, Governor DeSantis has also announced a deportation depot, but I heard Home Depot had issues with that, so it might have a new name. And these again are state facilities, so they don't have the same federal oversight. While federal oversight isn't great, it's at least something. But here we are. In the past, if you were detained, one of the first things that you could do was apply for a bond to be released. And you could, ask for a bond, you get released, and then you would have the ability to be out with your lawyer, gather your evidence. You have maybe a bit more time to work through your case, get everything together. But there was a decision issued by the Board of Immigration Appeals, which is kind of the governing body over the United States with immigration issues. And they came out with a case, matter of Q Lee, saying basically anybody who entered unlawfully doesn't get bond. They're subject to mandatory detention. So you don't even get a chance to try and explain to the judge, I have family that needs me, I'm the sole breadwinner, nothing like that. And so it's basically sent to mandatory detention. So can you imagine trying to fight your case in these conditions? Maybe, there are hunger strikes, maybe you have, a 1 hour phone call with your attorney and that's it. And that can mean months or even years in the detention system. Hardly anyone's going to want to do that. And so again, this is incentivizing people to send their own self-deportation and say, I don't want to fight, I give up, send me back, I give up. We have third country removals. So what this is essentially there are some recalcitrant countries that will not accept their own deportees, either for political reasons or maybe there just really is no proof that that person belongs to that country. So the big ones that refuse to take their people back: Cuba, Venezuela, Eritrea, China, Myanmar, Bosnia, Herzegovina, Burkina Faso, Cambodia, Gabon, and Gambia. So if you're from one of those countries and you have a deportation order now, odds are likely that you are going to be sent to a third country. Well, what are those third countries? Who has signed up? Who has created these deals with the Trump administration? So you can now be sent to, these are the countries that have agreed to accept deportees from other countries: Mexico, Guatemala, El Salvador, Costa Rica, Panama, Paraguay, Kosovo, South Sudan, Rwanda, and Eswatini, which is a teeny tiny country surrounded by South Africa. I had to look that one up. And so these are people, the third countries, these countries that are taking the deportees are making no guarantees of safety. These are people who have no connections to that country that are being sent there, no support system, and they're just basically left to do whatever it is that they need to do. If they're even allowed out, they could be detained, they could be murdered. It's like there was a big kerfuffle with detainees going to South Sudan, and they were stuck in basically cargo containers with their ICE agents, for weeks until they got things sorted out with the courts. Nobody's heard from the deportees since they landed in South Sudan, which is frightening. There is also a thing in immigration court called withholding of removal. Under asylum law, you have to apply for asylum within 1 year of entering the United States. If you don't, and there are special circumstances, you don't qualify for asylum. But you can apply for this lesser form of relief called withholding of removal, where the judge says, I do think that you would suffer harm and persecution if you went back to your home country. So we won't deport you because of that, but I'm not granting you asylum. We're now seeing people with these withholding of removal charges being picked up by ICE, detained, saying, hey, we just said we wouldn't send you back to Mexico, but we can send you to South Sudan. And so people who, again, have been living here for years, decades sometimes, with protection, with work permits, are being told they're no longer welcome. There is a decimation of legal services. There have been major funding cuts, and political pressure has just led to legal aid being cut and support groups to basically throw their hands up and say, we don't have the resources anymore to help our immigrant friends and family. But it's not just lawyers, it's ESL programs that no longer have funding. There are fewer citizenship prep courses, fewer safe spaces for vulnerable immigrants to ask questions. And I think about the nonprofit Kind, Kids in Need of Defense. In Atlanta, it was a robust office, probably a staff of about 20. It's now a staff of about 2.
Oh.
And so you're seeing toddlers left to defend themselves in immigration court. There is no right to an attorney in immigration court. And so there were these programs like Kind that step in and fill the gap. And those are gone. They no longer have the federal funding that they need to survive. In rural areas, any legal aid that may have helped immigrants has disappeared, or now it's 200 miles away to try and get help. We're also seeing big law firms, like the ones with the fancy marble and fancy artwork, not my office. We're seeing those firms shy away from taking pro bono cases. It used to be they were a great resource because they had money and they were able to do amazing work. And they may only do 1 or 2 cases a year, but they can make a real difference. Now, with the executive orders talking about law firms that are against the Trump administration and taking adverse actions against them, the law firms are telling their associates, don't take immigration cases anymore. And so we're losing that resource as well. So we're seeing people go to court alone. We're seeing scams from notarios, people who claim to know what they're doing, but usually cause more harm than good. They're not lawyers. They're usually just out to make a quick buck. And we're seeing more families torn apart because of this. So, any good news? Yes, we are still winning cases. If you follow my website, like every month we post our successes. We think it's so important for people to know that cases are still being won. There is still good news out there. It might be harder than it used to be. Straightforward cases now might take longer. You might get a request for evidence. Again, this is just causing fear and anxiety, but ultimately the person will win their case. We're seeing the federal courts doing the right thing. For example, they're saying, hey, we don't think you should send TPS for Afghanistan. That seems a little sketchy. We don't think Afghanistan is safe. So they're doing the right thing. But then you see SCOTUS, the Supreme Court, come in and say, I'm not going to wait on the merits. This is called the shadow docket. They're just saying, this is an emergency case. We know we need to decide something. We're not deciding the merits, but we're saying that the Trump administration can do what they want right now while we wait for a decision from the lower courts. Meaning people from Afghanistan can still be deported. Doesn't matter, like if the system ultimately says this was wrong, we shouldn't have TPS for Afghanistan. It's too late for people already deported. And people are waking up. You all are here. You are watching online. You care. I had an interesting conversation with folks who work with an anti-trafficking organization. They work predominantly with domestic trafficking survivors, but occasionally they have an international survivor, and that's where I come in. And we were talking about a mutual client, and they're like, yeah, you must be really busy right now. I'm like, yeah, it comes and goes. It's not a great busy, but yeah, we're busy. They're like, yeah, we voted for Trump, but we didn't think it would be like this. Like, we're really unhappy with what he's doing. So, I was kind of taken aback, so I'm like, what? Not everybody thinks like me? I live in my bubble, right? We all do. But this was a really good chance to say, oh, well, tell me, what did you think what he would do? Because, like, this is my world. This is what I knew would happen. And I'm like, well, the criminal immigration stuff, yeah, all on board with that. The gang members, get them out. I'm like, But then they're like, well, why are they going after my nanny, my housekeeper, things like that? So it's a hard conversation to have, but people are realizing that this isn't right. That even if they did vote for Trump and for mass deportations, they thought they were voting for getting the criminals out. True criminals, not just who they're calling criminals now, which I think is a big distinction. So how to fight back? Be a safe space for the immigrant community. Let people know that you are here, that you love them, that you care about them, so that if, as my dad would say, the peanut butter hits the fan, they know that they can trust you to help them with, getting their affairs in order, or their children, things like that. use your voice, protest. Thank you, Kathy, my stepmom, for going out to protest yesterday. Contact your elected officials, not just national, local. Talk to the police department, talk to city council. What are their thoughts on the 287G program? How do they cooperate? Do they cooperate with ICE? They may not have thought about it, or they may have just blindly signed on thinking, oh, this is what everybody wants because they voted for Trump. No, this is your chance to educate. And you have to start at the personal level, and you have to start locally. So I would definitely emphasize that. Know the facts and share them. Again, this is where it's hard to have conversations with people who didn't vote like we did, perhaps, or had a different impression of what would happen. And as I said earlier, it's so easy to just be mass deportations now, or they should have done it the legal way, and then for us to come back and say, well, no, here are the issues. It takes 5 minutes to explain everything. And so we have that working against us. But going beyond the headlines and being able to have intelligent conversations, it is possible. I know that we have our biases here. It's so important. So where do you get those facts? I highly recommend the American Immigration Council. They are very fact-driven, data focused. The numbers that I've used today primarily came from them. And faith is important to me. I follow We Choose Welcome. It's a faith-based organization talking about immigration from a faith-based perspective. Welcome the neighbor, care for the least of these. Everything that the administration seems to be turning on its head and yet is claiming it is the Christian thing to do. So know the facts and share them. And I will put in a plug here. I am starting a podcast in October. I'll share that, where we are going to have compassionate immigration conversations, dispelling the rumors like, why marriage to a U.S. citizen doesn't solve everything, or why there's often no line for people to get in, and that it's not possible for someone to just become a citizen. So, sorry, a little self-promotion there, October 9th. Donate to your local nonprofits. Certainly ones that do legal services, that's the big ticket item, but refugee resettlements. Even though the new refugees are coming in, refugees are here. They need support, they need housing, they need furniture, and so there are organizations that need your financial support. I know everybody needs our financial support right now. Thank you, NPR. Talk with your neighbors. Again, it's hard to have these conversations. Is this what they really thought they were voting for? Is it the cruelty? Is this really what they wanted? 99% of the time, they're going to say, no, this isn't what we wanted. Okay, well, that opens the door because then I'm like, okay, well, tell me, again, what did you want? What do you think should happen? And it allows you to infuse some facts into their level because they're guilty of the same thing. Document what you see. I think we have seen a lot of shame happening with ICE agents. I mean, they're covering their faces, right? They don't want to be known. And so when you video an ICE interaction at Home Depot or your neighbor's house, or just at work in the parking lot, you are creating a record. You are allowing the rest of the world to see what's happening, which is so important because we have seen people get released when the community gets involved and they say, oh, we don't want our neighbor Carol from the Philippines to get deported. She's been a member of our community for 30 years. We go to PTA with her, we go to church with her. When it becomes Carol from next door, that's personal. That's when the minds start to change. So humanize immigrants. Humanize your friends, your neighbors, your coworkers. Let people know that they're people. This is not rocket science. Love thy neighbor. We're in a church, so I will, again, love thy neighbor. It's not that hard. There's no but in there. All right, here we go. The end. My 30 minutes, but I don't think you're going to.
Would you give us 10 minutes of questions, possibly?
Yeah.
I'll open up for 10 minutes because we got to see your time for presentations.
Sorry.
No, it's fabulous.
All right. Mr. Here in the orange.
You talked about creating a safe space for immigrants. As a church, what is the ruling now as far as ICEs, what they can and can't do within a church?
So, very good point. So there used to be the safe spaces memo where basically I can go to churches, schools, shelters, things like that. That's all off the table. The important thing I think for churches is designate what's a public space versus a private space. Because if it's a private space, they cannot go in unless they have a judicial warrant. Judicial warrant signed by a judge, not by an ICE agent. They'll try to get away with that. And if it's a private area, like, that's where you want to send people to if you see ICE agents approaching. They are not allowed to do that unless you give the permission, which you shouldn't, but if they have the judicial warrant, then yes. So designating those spaces, asking for the proper documentation. We've seen it work at schools, for sure, because ICE agents don't usually get the judicial warrant, and they'll just go away.
Can I do one follow-on on that? In a church, designating an area as private, can it still be a place that some of the public might go into? Let's say like an office reception area or something like that.
Yes, as long as you designate, you put private up, like, that's what I've done in my office, the attorney area is all labeled private.
So just label it private.
Like a sign on
Yep.
the board.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Another follow-up, can it literally be the sanctuary, like the foyer is public, but anything in here is private?
I think that would be a tough sell because you are open as a church in the sanctuary, but like maybe the kitchen is private.
Okay,
But the
all
classrooms
right,
could be private.
Yep.
thanks.
Absolutely.
So,
Okay, I just wondered if you heard lately about Gaza, and that now nobody could come, have a visa to come, even the most of them injured and want to be killed, trying to serve, now forbidden to come to the United States.
Yeah, it's true, and this was just the development over the weekend, so maybe we should say 414 immigration policy changes. Basically saying anybody from Gaza, Palestinian, no longer can come to the United States to receive medical care. So just another insult upon insult to that poor
Not going to give
population.
us a bomb them with.
Yep.
We have already answered part of this, but if some unmarked, masked person comes to your door claiming that they're ICE or whatever, and they think there's someone hiding in your house, do you have to open the door?
You do not. You say, show me your judicial warrant. If you have status and you're safe, you can come outside. Again, you want to make sure you do it so that you're not creating an opening for them. But you can go outside and ask, show me your warrant. You don't have it, okay, bye-bye. If you do have it, then your rights change, but again, you're not gonna have it. But you have the right to refuse entry. You absolutely do.
I'm thinking that if the police had a legitimate warrant, they think you're a drug dealer, they can break down the door and that's it. But I
But
say,
they usually have the judicial warrant to do that ahead of time.
yeah,
ICE agents do not.
so you can bar them from coming in your door and just
Absolutely.
say, have a nice day, go
Just
away.
show me through the window, show me through the people what you have,
Yeah,
and that's all what you need to do.
but if you do have a judicial warrant, do you have to let them in?
Then you need to let them in or they'll force entry. But the odds of that happening are super small. We have had some clients who install Ring doorbells with the cameras so that they can watch, and so if ICE is on the door and they don't have the judicial warrant, you tell them to leave, they will sit in your driveway for minutes, hours, and you can watch. But again, having the Ring doorbell just makes it a little safer so that you can monitor to make sure they're actually gone. Lady in the green shirt?
How do we approach our local police officers?
So I think if you have connections, number one, you would do that, but you can call. Every office will have an administrative assistant and say, I would really like to talk to Chief so-and-so. And then what about? I would like to talk to them about immigration enforcement, what their thoughts and beliefs are. And they may already have a canned speech for you, but they're an elected official. Like, you have a right to access them. And just be persistent, and they will eventually take. Gray shirt, I'm so sorry. Yes, that's you.
I had read that the Venezuelan Little League team was denied visas to play in the Little League World Series.
They were.
These are like 13 and 14 and 12-year-olds.
Yes,
And has anything changed on that?
it has not. And it's going to be curious to see how this happens for works with the Olympics.
Yeah.
Right, and then Nikki?
Oh, so my husband is right now on a green card that still has some conditions that will be taken off for a while. What is the number one thing that you think we should, like, as far as, like, what do you think is the most important thing that we can do to kind of just hang out until it gets done?
So I'm advising people, A, not to travel internationally, because that can just cause more harm than good, even though it's legally it should be fine. But just document the heck out of your relationship. Save your bank statements, save your insurance, all of it, junk mail. Kill them with paperwork.
Cool, yes.
All right, yes.
I feel like it's more racially empowered, especially with how like stores like Home Depot, Lowe's, and other places like that are targeted. Is there a way that we can call those stores and like the managers or something and be like, hey, we don't like this, and maybe something about that, or is it just like just leave it alone?
Yeah, so it's a good question, but
Could you repeat this?
yeah, so like the raids at Home Depot in the parking lot, people who are looking for work, asking there, is there a way to contact like Home Depot headquarters and say this is cool? Yes, of course you can, but the parking lots are public space. They don't have control over that. I also think you can go there as a US citizen, someone who's not a brave, they're not gonna deport me back to Kansas, I mean, they can, that's fine. But, I think those of us who, are born in the United States, are white, I hate saying it, and don't have an accent, we have privilege. We need to use it, we need to use it to protect our neighbors. If you know that Home Depot is being targeted, go hang out in the Home Depot parking lot. Nothing may happen, but if it does, you're there to document and video record, and you can help save a life that way.
What's the status of naturalization?
So status of naturalization is still good. There's been talk about denaturalizing people, but what I will say with that is that denaturalizing requires a federal court to get involved, so real court with real judges, not just a USCI officer who's being dictated what to do by Pam Bondi or Christine. And so even if they start to ramp that up, I think the success rates are going to be horribly low for them, which is great.
There were two questions, and I can't add one, and both have an answer. So, no, I was just wondering if you could wrap up those two, and then we can wrap up the questions. Ken?
The people that had the regime has made disappear, what happens to their personal property?
This is an interesting one. I was actually reading a story about an increase of pets in shelters because their owners, their families have been disappointed. I mean, you just don't think of these things until they happen. So this is where they need to have powers of attorney so that people in the United States can wrap up their affairs and do what they need to do. It's something that we're advising all of our clients to do. There's a lot of talk in the immigrant community about having someone you trust to be able to handle that for you.
For those who are immigrants, there is a power of attorney workshop coming up, I believe, in September from Valderas.
September 6th. You go to Kansas Immigration Coalition, you can get, on our website, you can get information on that, September 6th.
And you mentioned, those who are white and don't have accents can video record deportations. What do you do with such a recording? So suppose I happen to be in the Home Depot parking lot and I do make a video. I don't necessarily know who is the person who is getting detained, who their relatives are. Am I going to try to ask them for their phone number or information, or am I not interfering like that?
You're going to upload it to social media and YouTube, and it's going to go viral.
Just hope it reaches the right person that way.
And, also in that moment, I didn't mention this, but in that moment, you can call the police and say, I'd like to report a kidnapping. And it sounds like the system, so that's a good one too, to get these on the record.
Okay, we are winding down, but I know we had two more questions, so Debbie?
That's partially a comment too, but as a thinking, feeling American, I am so offended and so angry by the behavior of our government. I am abused daily, disabused of the notion that we can't do that here, and this is not due process. But Is anybody suing the administration for doing this? How long will it take? And what can we do in the meantime when we see people, I just read one today, a woman in LA whose last name is Velez, and she was picked up. She's been here her whole life. She was deprived of water for 24 hours. Talk about cruel and unusual. We're not supposed to do that. What can we do about this?
There is a lot of litigation. So when I talked earlier about like the big litigation, that doesn't take into account all the individual cases. So she's gonna have claims under the Federal Tort Claims Act to get compensation for the suffering that she went through. In addition to having her immigration attorney, so it takes a team basically. We don't hear about these cases as much, but they are being sued. It does take a lot, and ICE is appealing everything right now. So it gets caught up in the court system, goes up on appeal. So it's slow, but it's happening.
Sir, you have to get up.
Oh, no, it's just stretching, sorry.
I know that when someone is slated for deportation, I had a student who was, had served time in the prisons and was to be deported. And I discovered then that once he had served his time, he had no rights to any legal representation. He would be out. But is there a point before that we can get involved in individual cases? I mean, is there, before they actually get, is the point when they're actually charged with or given orders for deportation, is that when they lose all right to representation?
So yes, so the question is that kind of the intersection of criminal law and immigration law. Someone is arrested, does their time in jail, then they get transferred over to ICE custody for deportation proceedings. At that point, the person has been here for more than 2 years. They're not going to get expedited order of removal. They might have ways to fight, but how do you get involved? You can't fight the immigration case until it starts, and so that can put the person, 2 steps behind the government. One thing that can happen is that you can do what's called post-conviction relief, and so, maybe they were charged with felonious assault, but maybe you can get it somehow changed to, when you talk to a criminal defense attorney, can that be changed to disorderly conduct, because that carries a lesser immigration consequence. So there are some ways you can manipulate it within the criminal system, but it's a fine art. There's not a lot that can be done.
But they are technically not allowed any representation.
There is no
once they
representation
are
for
given
immigration.
orders.
Nope. None.
One last one.
What about like elementary schools? Is ICE able to go into the elementary school and take these kids without their parents? And if that does happen, would another adult be allowed to be like, you can't take the kid without their parent?
Yeah, so the question is about schools and what ICE can and cannot do regarding the children. The schools have done an excellent job protecting their children. ICE will come to schools and say, we want to, see so-and-so, and the administrator's like, show me your judicial warrant, show me that you have the ability to do this. They're like, no, don't have it, then they leave. This has protected a lot of children. Now, in the case that ICE does try to take the child, what they'll usually do is I've heard this happen, they will have the child call their parent and say, hi mom, I'm being picked up by ICE, I need you to come and get me. Mom comes to pick up their child, mom gets detained as well. And then they're detained together. So that's kind of a bait and switch there. But if a child, for whatever reason, gets put into the deportation process, rephrase, if the child is in the United States and has a guardian, they do have to work to facilitate reunification. But again, that's going to lead to usually a parent being detained. But that's where you also want to have someone who's not a U.S. citizen, someone who is a U.S. citizen on your kids' emergency contacts at school, so that if something happens, they could call me, for example, to come and get the kid. I won't be detained, I won't be deported, so I'm a safe person. So again, building those connections within the community so that you can be that resource.
Well, we're educated, we do have a.
Yeah, so on Zoom, somebody's asking for individuals who are undocumented but currently working with an attorney on their immigration case, is there anything they can do in the event they are detained to ensure that family is notified of where they are taken, such as some sort of a tracker or something.
How do you find someone who's been disappeared? So ICE has an online detention or detainee locator. ICE.gov, you need the person's A number, alien number, it's kind of like a social security number for immigrants, or their date of birth and their country of birth, and you can find them. It's slow to update, so it's, maybe 24 hours to find out where they are. It's also only for ICE, so alligator Alcatraz, not an ICE facility. The people who are there are not in the ICE system, and you can't find them online. So, yeah, it's new challenges every day.
Are there any other questions?
That was the one.
I don't want to keep Tracy here all night. I know we could talk to her all night. I think the questions are numerous, but I do want to thank Tracy Morgan with the Open Immigration Law. We had so many new visitors here that we only saw the day of the presentation. Many immigrants. We had 50, I think I counted 60 to 70 people that attended. Look at the room now. That tells you the fear that's in the air right now, and that should not be happening in our United States of America. So I just wanted to say that, and I do thank you once again, Tracy.
Tracy Morgan, of course, is practicing in Atlanta. There's the Kansas Invitation Network, and we had somebody here, so I let him say a few words.
My home church is Hope Mennonite Church. My name is Marcus, and I just wanted to reiterate that when we asked for immigration lawyers here in town, what can we do? One of the main things was to have a power of attorney clinic. So if people are detained, their children can be taken care of, their property taken care of. There is a power of attorney clinic on September the 6th. To get more information, I would go to kansasimmigration.coalition.org, and they'll have more information on how people can sign up. The location is not disclosed. People are safe. They can sign up, and they will get an email as to when their appointment is and where the location